Hello, and welcome back to Organic Gardening for Beginners. My name is Jessica, the host of this show, and today we are jumping into another episode about seed starting. Specifically, I am going to be mentioning some questions that I've been getting recently via email or on Instagram, or that I've heard from folks at the farmers market when I'm there on the weekends. And I also have a few companies that I want to mention as being awesome options for getting your seeds if you still are in the seed shopping mindset, if you haven't gotten all your seeds yet, to give them a try. There are various things that they specialize in, reasons that I go towards one company over the other depending on what I'm looking for. And just to be clear, none of these companies are like partnerships or brand deals or anything like that. These are just companies that I have used over the years and I can vouch for as being good companies to order from. So some of the questions that I have been getting, they span both indoor seed starting and outdoor direct sowing, which I'm actually glad about because I think it's, important to not focus on just one method over the other because, we do both as spring goes along. So, one of the questions that I've gotten a few times, and I actually did a reel about this many months ago, I think it was actually last summer, and it was about why aren't your seeds covered? I just recently posted a reel and I was showing my seed starting setup and some of my soil blocks that I was showing, they hadn't sprouted yet. And I got two questions about this. One was, why aren't the seeds covered? And then the other was, why aren't the trays covered? And these questions are in no particular order, not even chronological. We're just putting them out there. So some seeds need light to germinate, and so they don't want to be covered. And it feels really weird, even to this day, years and years of seed starting later, it feels weird to me to not cover seeds. It's like tucking yourself into bed and not putting a blanket over you. You're going to get cold. You're going to feel uncomfortable. Like, where's that pressure of the blanket that is so cozy? And I imagine a seed feeling naked laying on top of the dirt. But that is just how they roll. And so this applies to seeds like snapdragons, black-eyed Susan, straw flowers, celosia, if I remember correctly, doesn't need to be covered either. Some salvia seeds don't like to be covered. So these are really the tiny seeds. You wouldn't ever not cover a larger seed like nasturtium or bean or pea or sunflower. It's just these tiny ones. And so even though it feels counterintuitive, just leave them uncovered. If you are nervous about them drying out, there are two ways that you can avoid this. One is by sprinkling just a tiny bit of vermiculite over the top of your seed trays or soil blocks or yogurt cups, whatever you're starting seeds in. And vermiculite is a volcanic rock, an expanded volcanic rock. It's super fluffy and super, super light, and it is great at providing a little bit of cover while still allowing light through. It's also a fantastic material to put on top of all of your seed trays to help prevent damping off. And I don't have the exact mechanism memorized to, recite back to of exactly why vermiculite prevents damping off, but it does. You can find studies about it and other more professional gardeners than myself also vouching for this method. So it's a really handy material or growing medium to have on hand. And we're going to talk about damping off in this list of questions. So if you heard that term and you're not sure what that means, don't worry, I'm going to get there. So for your seeds that you don't cover, you can either cover them with a very light sprinkling of vermiculite, or you can put a plastic bag, or some people use saran wrap, or you can buy humidity domes and put that over your seed tray so that it holds in some of the moisture that those seeds need in order to germinate. And I almost always reuse like a produce bag or a garbage bag or, a shopping bag. And that works totally fine. You just put the tray in there, close it on one end. You'll see the water condensing and beating at the top of it, and that's awesome. And if you put them on a heat mat which will also get into heat mats, then it gets so nice and warm and humid in there, and the seeds love it. So the important thing, if you do cover it like that, is to check on them. Probably the first 2-3 days, you really don't need to do anything because nothing's going to be sprouting yet. But from that 4th day and beyond, I would at least glance at them once a day, open the bag, check on them, make sure that nothing has started to sprout. Because once they do start to sprout, you will want to take that bag off. If a few have sprouted, the other ones are going to be close behind. And if you leave the humidity and moisture trapped in there for too long, then you can get fungal issues or damping off with your seedlings. And so that humidity that was a benefit then becomes a detriment. So don't leave the bag on there indefinitely. And that goes for the humidity dome as well, which if you've not seen a humidity dome, it is a clear plastic cover that you put over your seed tray that turns it into this little mini greenhouse. They are ridiculously expensive for some reason. I don't understand why humidity domes are so spendy compared to other seed starting materials, which is part of why I never buy them. And they blow away if you look at them wrong. And I just have never invested in them because they're kind of a pain in the butt to me. So I use reuse bags. And then when I'm done with them, with the bags, I can reuse them, as I normally would in the house. So that is one of the tricks for starting those little itsy bitsy seeds, or the ones where the back of the package says, do not cover, they need light to germinate. Another question that I got was for why not cover the trays altogether, which I kind of just addressed in that first question. If I have planted seeds, larger seeds that need soil over them, like nasturtium or cilantro or basil, peppers, I don't typically cover them with anything, not a bag or a humidity dome, because the soil is going to hold in that moisture already. And so the covering it again is a little bit redundant. You can if you want to. If you know you aren't going to be checking on your seeds consistently during that week or so of waiting for germination, then covering them can be a great idea, whether that's with the reused plastic bag or the humidity dome, something that's going to help hold in the moisture and make it less risky if you don't get to them for a whole day to check and make sure nothing is drying out. While we're talking about germination and seeds and soil and whatnot, another question that I got recently was, what will happen if I plant my seeds too early out in the garden and the soil is too cold for the seeds to actually sprout? Are the seeds going to be okay, or do I have to start all over again once the weather has warmed up a bit? And the answer I'll give here is the same as what I gave to her who wrote me the message. I'm not giving names on these because these were emails and messages, and I don't, want to be the jerk that reads somebody's email without their permission. So no names on these ones. But in any case, the answer I gave was that if the weather is just cold, and that's really the only thing preventing germination is the temperature, then chances are the seeds are going to be totally fine. And as soon as the soil warms up, the weather warms up, then you will start to see those seeds sprouting through. However, if it's cold and rainy and just soggy, no dry spell whatsoever, then the seeds could rot. It's not a guarantee. It's, a maybe, as annoying as those answers are. But if the soil is just completely saturated for, we'll say a couple of weeks, then it is possible that the seeds will just rot right there and they won't germinate. The other thing that can happen if you sow your seeds and then you get days and days straight of rain is that the seeds could wash away from erosion in your garden bed. If you have planted the seeds and then covered it with a bit of mulch like straw or wood shavings or leaves, then that's going to reduce the chance of the seeds washing away, but you're still stuck with that problem of saturated soil. So in that case, I would personally re-sow, so that way if that first round isn't viable anymore, then I know that I've got my backup round of sowing that's going to come up once the weather warms up. So if it's just cold, you're probably fine. If it's cold and really soggy, then you might want to plant again if you still have extra seeds. Okay, and This is a question that I sometimes forget to mention because I've just been starting seeds for so long, but sometimes people ask me how many seeds per hole or cell in a seed tray. And again, this one kind of depends. If you're looking at larger seeds like beans or sunflowers, nasturtium, squash, cucumbers, then you are pretty safe at just putting in one. It's totally possible that some seeds won't germinate because some seeds don't have 100% germination rate, where if you plant 10 seeds, all 10 will sprout. That's 100% germination rate. Some seeds are 80, some seeds are 50. It depends on the plant itself, like what the variety is. It depends on how the seeds have been stored, if they've been subject to big temperature swings or humidity or heat. All of those things can lessen the seed's life from, or its chance of germinating. And so if you want to be really sure that you have something sprouting in every single place that you plant seeds, then you can double up and put 2 or even 3 seeds per hole or cell in your tray, especially if, you find a seed packet from like 10 years ago that you want to see if they're still alive, or you have your seeds from last year that you forgot outside over the winter. And so they maybe got rained on, or they were covered, but still subject to all the dampness in the air over winter, or they got hot out in the summertime. Then I would definitely put in more than 1 seed per hole just to make sure that you have at least something coming up if their germination rate is not that great anymore. And so with smaller seeds, and especially herbs, I almost always put more than 1 seed in the cell or the hole, especially for things like chives or basil or cilantro. I put at least 3 seeds. For cilantro, I do sometimes as many as 6, because one little stem of basil or one little stem of cilantro just isn't going to produce a whole lot, and they can really thrive with that tight spacing. So if you look at my raised beds, for example, where I have, my 1 tomato plant spaced every 2 feet, you're going to see clumps of maybe 5 basil stems in one area because I planted all of those together, and they're just going to grow up and out and find the space that they need. And the same goes for the cilantro. So those ones, or thyme is another one, parsley, a lot of herbs. I personally plant several because it's not detrimental to their growing habit. And I can then get more plants in the same amount of space, as opposed to one itsy bitsy thyme plant, here, another one a foot apart, another one a foot apart. That is an inefficient way of planting in my experience. Obviously, as with everything, you do you, but I like to keep certain plants keep certain plants planted closer together than others. Whereas I would never put, something like 3 tomatoes. There's a siren going by. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I would never put something like 3 tomatoes in 3 tomato seeds in one hole and let them all grow to maturity. Same for, zucchini or pumpkin plant. You just don't need that. Alrighty. And then, so what if you do plant too many seeds? What if you took that lettuce packet and you dumped the whole thing in one pot, or you put 20 lettuce seeds in one cell of your plant tray, or you had those old seeds and you put in 3 and they all sprouted? What do you do then? Well, this is where something called thinning comes into play. And basically it's cutting out or snipping off the extra plants so that the ones you leave behind have the space that they need to grow really well. And if, you plant 3 tomato seeds in one hole, then let them grow for a few weeks, see which one is looking the strongest. And then you can either gently pull out the 2 extras and plant them elsewhere, or you can honestly just pinch them off with your fingernails or get a little pair of scissors and snip them off and just murder them where they stand, and let your last one standing have all that space and nutrition and water and all that stuff to really grow to its full potential. If you have oversown something like lettuce, like those 20 seeds in the cell, that's way, way more lettuce plants than you need in that amount of space. And so again, just like the tomatoes, I would recommend either teasing out some of the seedlings to plant elsewhere, or just snip at least half of the seedlings so that you're left with 10. And that would really only be if you were growing something like a leaf lettuce. Whereas if it were a romaine where you're expecting to get heads out of each of those seedlings, you will get 10 itsy bitsy romaine heads, even though it'd be nice if they all grew to maturity. And so if you want a full-size lettuce, then snip off all those extras and until you're left with just one. And you can apply this thinking to any seedlings. So, obviously I just gave examples for tomatoes and lettuce, but if it's cucumbers and you've got 5 coming up all right next to each other, which those ones are a little bit of an exception because you can grow them up a trellis, and so that can kind of space them out. But say you've got 5 sunflowers or 5 zucchinis or 20 dill plants, coming up in one cell or one little pot, then kind of use your judgment of, do you want to try to separate out those little seedlings and plant them elsewhere, or should you just cut them off, leaving behind 1 or 2 really strong ones to grow up to full maturity? So that is a very common beginner question of, what do I do if I've planted too many seeds? So this is where you have to get a little ruthless and think about the ones that you want to have the conditions they need to be really strong and well producing. So the last couple questions I've gotten lately are specific to what happens once the seeds sprout. And the 2 biggest issues that, if you listen to any other gardening podcast, chances are you've heard them talking about this as well, or if you watch YouTube videos, and those are damping off and leggy seedlings. Those are 2 of the very big, I won't call them mistakes, issues that you can see with seed starting. And it is not just for beginners. I just had some dill seedlings come up the other day that were not under lights, and I knew they needed to get under the lights sooner than later, and I dilly-dallied just a little bit too long, and now they are a little bit leggier than I would like. They'll be okay. I will still plant them, and they'll be good to go, but it still happens to me too. Life gets in the way. We just found a dog. There was a lost dog wandering around our street and almost getting hit by cars, and so we spent the afternoon getting this dog and asking around the neighborhood and posting on Facebook and calling the shelters and all the things. And so, stuff happens. The dog had a microchip. It got reunited with its family, and it turned out just fine. But point being of that little tangent is, life gets in the way, and sometimes you get a leggy seedling because you lost a day getting it under light. So I totally understand. But a leggy seedling, after all that rigmarole, sorry guys, is a seedling that is long and thin and weak because it hasn't gotten strong enough light from the get-go. And I do mention leggy seedlings in other episodes, but it deserves a recap here because it's a common question. And so it might look like a good thing. You've got this tall little seedling, and so you are thinking, great, it's off to a good start. It's growing really tall. Awesome. But unless it's on a deep green, really leafy stem at the same time of being tall, then chances are it's just a leggy seedling, which means it's a weak stem that is going to be way more susceptible to breaking, to getting blown over in the wind, and being too weak to support the rush of growth that it's going to have once you get it outside into the full sun and the warm temperatures and the fertile soil and all that. And so when your seeds start to sprout, this is the perfect time to put them under lights. And again, on Instagram, I posted a reel about my seed starting setup, and somebody commented saying, oh, I don't think I've got my seeds close enough to the lights, or my lights close enough to my seed trays. And I was telling them, yeah, you've got to typically put the lights about 2 inches away from the soil surface of your seed trays. If you are using professional grow lights that are very strong, then you don't need them to be that close. But if you're just using regular shop lights, like what I use, my Home Depot shop lights, those are not specific grow lights. And so I do need to make sure that they are close to the soil surface so that the seedlings are not stretching so far to get to the light source. So if you find yourself in this position where you have leggy seedlings, in most cases, you can fix it by repotting the seedling and burying the stem in the soil. So pretend you have a tomato plant. And with tomatoes, it works really well because tomatoes put out roots along their stem. So you've got a 2-inch tomato plant, but it's 2 inches of stem and 2 little leaves at the very top. There aren't any other leaves along the stem. What you would then do is take the seedling out of the seed tray or the little cup or the toilet paper roll or the egg carton that you sprouted it in, and you would repot it into a larger container, making sure that at least 1 inch of that 2-inch long stem is buried under the soil. And again, just like not covering your seeds, this can feel weird. Like, am I not smothering it? Isn't it going to die because the stem is now covered in dirt? And it won't. There are a few where I haven't had as good of luck burying leggy stems, and in that case, I just choose to start over. But for the most part, this will work out just fine. Your seed will continue to grow and strengthen with the support of that soil around the stem. And so you take that weaker 2-inch stem down to 1 inch or even 1/2 inch, honestly, and then it's going to continue its growth and kind of recover from that legginess so that you don't have to start over again. So give that a try. If you decide you started things too early or it's just too far gone, then, of course you can resow and compost the leggy seedlings, or you know what, you can throw it in a pot, stick it outside, and may the best seedling survive and see what happens. That works too sometimes. I just actually found a little flat of chives that I had sown last fall that I don't remember why I tossed them in the compost, but I did. I don't know if I thought they were dead or hadn't sprouted yet or what, but I just found them a couple of weeks ago, and these seed trays were full of these beautiful chive starts that I have now repotted so that they can straighten out a little bit because the chives themselves were growing a little bit crooked. And I'm going to put them out in the garden. It was great. So you never know what you're going to find in the compost pile 6 months later from something that you tossed out thinking it was done for, and really it just needed some time to recover. So it's worth a shot if you've got the time and patience. So that's leggy seedlings. I know I've mentioned this in a past episode, but you will often hear the advice that you can use a sunny window for your seedlings. And in some cases, I can recommend it because it's, maybe all you've got, or it's a little pot of basil that you brought home that you're not ready to put outside. Stick that guy in the window. It'll be totally fine. But if you are growing something like pepper seeds, just putting them in the window is not going to be enough light to get good, strong starts. And in that case, I would recommend just totally skipping the seed starting and buying a seedling, because it's going to result in a much stronger plant. And so if you're totally desperate, try the window, but take it all with some expectation that you're not going to have the strongest seedlings in the world, and they probably are going to be leggy because window light is just not strong enough. And so plan ahead to bury them so that the stems can get the support of the soil around them. So, side note, I believe that was in the episode about thrifty gardening and what to do if you're not going to buy shop lights, if you want to learn more about growing at the window. And then lastly, one of the very common questions that I get from newer gardeners is, what is damping off and how do I prevent it? And damping off is a phenomenon where your seedlings will have all sprouted. They'll have gotten to 1/2 inch, maybe 1 inch tall, and then they all fall over and die. And there is a pinched look about the stem where it looks like you pinched it but didn't rip off the stem, and that's what made them fall over. And it is, I'm going to look bad here. I don't remember if it's fungal or bacterial. I'm almost certain it's fungal, a fungal disease that results from too much moisture and or too poor of air circulation in your growing area. And it happens to the best of us. Like I always say, I have had seeds that damp off because I just wasn't paying enough attention. So I'm not better than anybody. Experienced, yes. Better, no. And this one, there is no recovery. When you have leggy seedlings, you can try to bring them back. If your seedlings are experiencing damping off, then chuck them in the compost and start over again without wasting any time, because no amount of TLC and hoping is going to bring them back, unfortunately. And earlier I mentioned that you can use vermiculite to help prevent damping off. And I don't know why per se. I know that it helps. I use vermiculite on the top of almost all my seed trays. If it's just keeping the moisture more even or preventing the fungal spores from reaching the soil, like if they hit the vermiculite and so it can't spread. I have read about it in the past, and I just honestly don't remember what the specifics are, but I do know that it works. Like I mentioned, other more professional gardeners than myself talk about it as well. So to prevent damping off, or if you see it happening and you're starting over again, don't overwater your seed trays to where they are totally saturated all the time. The soil needs to dry out to prevent the damping off fungus or other fungus or even algae or fungus gnats from finding a very hospitable environment. And so watering maybe once a day, depending on how warm it is, every 2 days, if it's a little bit cooler, that can help to give the soil a chance to kind of dry out between waterings. And that alone will greatly reduce the chance of damping off. And if I should mention this damping off the fungus or the spores is not anything like contagious to the rest of your growing area. And so you don't need to worry about touching, the damped off seedling and then touching something else and worry that you're going to contaminate it. That has never happened in my experience. And it's a very isolated thing for the conditions of those particular seedlings that just died. Okay, so those were some of the most common questions or common issues that I hear about with seed starting, or that I've honestly had myself in the past. And now I want to leave you with a few recommendations of where to get seeds from if you are still shopping for your season's worth of seeds. And I have mentioned, I think, all of these companies before as well, in passing or mentioning what I got where. And one of my favorite places to get flower seeds specifically is Swallowtail Seeds. And I don't remember what state they're based out of, but they have good prices. Their seed packets are not too big to where you're getting 200 marigold seeds or 200 zinnia seeds that you can't possibly get through in a season or two. And so that can help keep the cost down a little bit. You get free shipping over, I think it's a $60 order. And they have the greatest variety of types of flowers, both in flowers themselves, like cosmos, marigolds, sunflowers, but then like within cosmos, there are 40 plus varieties. Within zinnias, there's like 50. And more so than some of the other, like burpees or is it just burpee? Or, you go to the seed rack at Home Depot, which might have like 3 different zinnias or 4 different zinnias. Swallowtail has a ton, like dozens, literally, of almost every type of flower. Even something like petunias, they've got 20 plus varieties. Sweet peas, they have dwarf ones, climbing ones. So I really like Swallowtail for their flowers specifically. They have veggies and herbs too, but I tend to stick to the flowers for them. Speaking of herbs, one of my newly discovered seed companies that I've been using a lot this year is called Strictly Medicinal, and they are based out of Oregon, Southern Oregon, and they completely specialize in medicinal herbs, as obviously the name would imply. They sell seedlings too, and like root cuttings and whatnot, and they have these really awesome collections of like the tea lover's garden or the butterfly lover's garden or your basic herbal medicinal collection that are super fun to explore. I love looking at collections. That's part of what I sell actually at the farmer's market, because collections and curated collections of seeds I just think are so fun and serve such a purpose. But they have Strictly Medicinals. They have a ton of information on their website and in their catalog. They send out a paper catalog if you request it about how to start seeds, even trickier herbs, because some herbs can be very tricky to start from seed, either because of temperature requirements or just really slow germination or minuscule seeds that are also really slow to grow. And they are super supportive, very active at answering questions and providing education. And I really like this company. I've ordered seeds from them so far. I am also going to place orders for root cuttings and seedlings for stuff that either I struggle to start from seed or it's just faster to get a root cutting. Like I'm growing comfrey among our fruit trees, and I'm starting that from seed too, but I'm also going to order some root cuttings just to kind of get a jump on a small crop. So check that one out if you are like me and starting to dip your toe in the medicinal herb world, because they have a ton of information and super high quality seeds that they grow all on site. They produce all their own seeds, and I highly recommend them. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, that's their full name, is another very popular company that I also enjoy ordering from. They are based out of Missouri, and they specialize in heirloom and open pollinated varieties. So the older brands like Mortgage Lifter or your basic orange calendula or squash varieties that have been around for forever, that's their bread and butter. That's what they specialize in. They do have some newer varieties, like rediscovered ones, varieties that have been in lower production numbers over the years, and they're working on boosting up the numbers. They also do a lot of education. They usually have like a tulip festival in the spring, and then they have a summer, or is it in the fall? They've got another festival later in the season, summer or fall. And they have a seed catalog they put out that is all about seed starting in addition to the varieties they sell. But this one is more like education, and really promoting growing your own food, saving your own seeds. And I tend to buy a lot of vegetables from them, not so much on the flower side, because I, trend toward swallowtail for those ones. Nothing against Baker Creek's flower seeds. They're all great. Just kind of, we all have our tendencies. But if you're looking for heirloom and open pollinated varieties because you just prefer that, or you want to try saving your own seeds, then I would highly recommend giving Baker Creek a try. And they also have free shipping over a $10 order, which is pretty cool. They ship super fast, like 3 days, from order to receiving your envelope. It's really cool. And they also include a free seed packet in every order, which is awesome. Sometimes you get repeats if you, make multiple orders in the same month or a few days apart because you forgot something. But I'm not about to complain about too many extra seeds, even if I'm getting 2 packets of lettuce. I just got an order from them the other day, and my free seed packet was spoon tomatoes. And I've never heard of them. And the picture on the packet, they've got beautiful pictures, by the way, on their packets. Strictly Medicinals just does a text-based packet, as does Swallowtail, whereas Baker Creek has color photos on every seed packet, and they're gorgeous. And in any case, these spoon tomatoes are tiny, like a pea, maybe, or a garbanzo bean. And so the picture is like 5 tomatoes on this one little spoon on a table. So obviously, hence the name. And you bet your butt I'm going to try growing those this summer and see if it's worth it for them being that tiny, because they look a little bit painstaking to harvest. But, that's the fun of a free packet of seeds, where you really lose nothing by planting at least one and seeing what happens. 2 others that I'll mention are Pine Tree Garden Seeds. I've also mentioned these guys before. And they are kind of a general seed company where they have an equal focus on veggies, flowers, and herbs. But what I really like about Pine Tree is they have smaller packet sizes and thus lower prices. So instead of getting that 200 Cosmos seeds I mentioned or 200 lettuce seeds, you might get 20 Cosmos seeds and 50 lettuce seeds, which you might, hesitate and say, well, I want more. Great, use one of the other companies. But if you're really on a budget and you're looking for that kind of $2 to $3 seed packet, price range, then Pine Tree is really good for you. They also have plants. I have not bought plants from them personally, so I can't speak to that, or like, seedlings. And they also have occasional promotions for free shipping over a certain dollar amount. So keep an eye out for that. But Pine Tree is a great one if you just want a little sample size of lots of different things to kind of find out what works for you and what your new favorite's going to be. And then the last one is True Leaf Market, which you may have very well seen on various blogs or YouTube channels because they promote themselves pretty heavily. But one thing I really like about True Leaf is they do a great job at providing really reasonably priced, or competitively priced, I should say, microgreen seeds and supplies. When I first started growing microgreens at home, I just bought one of their kits that had like the trays and the coco coir and the seeds and the spray bottle and all that, because once I priced it all out, it was a great way to kind of introduce myself to growing micros. And then they have bulk quantities of coco coir, if that's going to be your growing medium for your microgreens, bulk seeds, bulk, lots of things. You can get a lot of things in bulk. They also have veggies, flowers, and herbs, a relatively extensive supply of veggies and herbs, a little bit limited on flowers for me. But they have all your standard ones. But for microgreens specifically and growing medium like coco coir or peat moss or peat pellets, things like that, True Leaf is a really great source for that. The last thing I want to mention here, this isn't a pitch for any seed company or not, but check out your regional small seed companies as well. And I'm not listing any specifics because, by virtue of it being regional, it's going to totally depend. But there are almost always small regional seed companies for your locale. And maybe not, your exact town, but in your area or your state. So there's a company up in Bellingham, Washington, where I used to live for many years, called Adaptive Seeds. And they grow and harvest all of their own seeds that are used to the climate up there, that are used to the season length, the rain, and are well adapted to the weather and the climate and the soil, for that matter, up in that area. And so if you live in that area, then using those seeds might give you an advantage over buying seeds from, say, Baker Creek, that's in Missouri, that has a totally different climate than in northern Washington. Or I said I wasn't going to mention companies, but here I go. Or there's the San Diego Seed Company that, obviously that's a warm climate, a very long growing season, very different soil than other areas of the United States. And so if you live in San Diego, then you might be well set to buy seeds from the San Diego Seed Company. So that's what I mean by a regional company. A lot of bigger companies buy from one mega wholesaler that they might be U.S. seeds, but where in the U.S., who knows? And if you get those seeds, your burpee seed packet from Home Depot, it's going to grow. Totally don't take what I'm saying as buy regional seeds or you're totally doomed. Not at all. But you could have an advantage or a better yield if you are buying and using seeds that were produced in your region, your soil, your weather, etc. You could always do a side-by-side test. Find your little local company and get lettuce seeds or kale or a tomato or whatever from them, and then get the same variety from a different, maybe national company, and grow them side by side, give them the same amount of water, same type of soil, and see what they do. That's the ultimate test. I love those experiments. It's always really handy to get firsthand experience of what works in your garden. Do you want to make a point of buying regional seed, or are you okay with buying national company seeds? It's totally a preference thing. Your garden's going to be awesome no matter what. But just something I wanted to mention because I research it from time to time. I do buy some local seeds, but then, as I've obviously mentioned, I buy U.S. seeds too, like Swallowtail. I honestly couldn't tell you what state they're based out of. And I've had great luck with their seed packets in California and in Oregon. And so, get seeds where you can. Okay, that's it. This ended up being a really long episode. If you're still with me at the end, then thank you very much. And I hope your seed starting is off to a great start. If you have questions, you can always email me. And that's it for today. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.